We're good.
Let's roll. Well, good evening again. The hour being after 7:30, it's my honor and privilege to call the April 30th, 2020 school committee meeting to order. As I said before, we're meeting remotely. Our first order of business is the Waffle High School student report. We have our favorite perennial student, Brendan Mahoney, to give us an update of the goings on with digital learning at the high school.
Good evening. My name is Brendan Mahoney, and I'm a junior at Waffle High. As all of you know, last Tuesday, Governor Charlie Baker announced that all schools will continue remote learning for the rest of the year. Although this is not preferable, the students and teachers are making it work the best they can so that the learning process can stay as normal as possible. Administration and student council have been making an effort to meet and plan activities in the coming months for seniors. As for right now, the grades are still complete and incomplete, but this, as well as the status of final exams, among other things, are still up in the air. As for clubs, many clubs have been doing virtual meetings. For example, Best Buddies have been having virtual themed meetings, such as a country music meeting and a Bring Your Pet to Best Buddies meeting. AP tests will be conducted online between May 11th and May 20th, and the national Spanish exams were taken this week online. And even though this transition has been tough to online learning and challenging, I would like to say that Waffle has done a great job all around to make sure the students are getting the best education possible during this time. That's all I have. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Brendan. Any questions for Brendan? This is Eric.
So I wanted to just add that, I don't know if this will be backwards, all Walpole Rebels can submit some information to Walpole Media. If you want to do some of the things you would have done at school, you can put it on television. So we'll put this out in the teacher notes, and we'll share it through the meetings. But if you have submissions for Walpole Media for things that you've done at school, in your virtual world, you can send it to info@walpolemedia.tv.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Very good. Moving on, our next order of business is new business. First order of new business, elementary math team update, and I believe Carolyn Kelly is going to take over for the presentation.
Yes, before they start, I just want to let Mr. Hahn, he has a few words to say.
Yeah, I asked Bridget if I could just say a few words right here in the beginning, which I don't normally do, but I wanted to just publicly thank this math team. We started the year in a tough situation when we had a late resignation and we weren't able to hire a qualified math coach, but we put together a great team here. Carolyn Kelly has always been our math coach at OPR in Boyden, and we were fortunate enough to have Amy Fredette and Brian Sullivan from Fisher and Elm act as liaisons for their school, and then of course having Ann Vera Cruz come in as a consultant. They meet once a week, and I just wanted to take a moment to thank them for their incredible work. They're going to share what they did, but they're a group that has worked so hard to meet the needs of our schools and really collaborated to ensure that we have not missed a step this year in our math elementary curriculum. So thank you very much.
Excellent.
Okay, Carolyn, so I'm going to make you the host, so give me 1 second.
Thank you.
Where did she go? Oh, here she is.
Good evening. I wanted to introduce our math team to begin with. Let me just share. So our math team this year, a little different than last year. Instead of having two math coaches, one for two schools and one for the other two schools, we put together a team with a member of Elm Street School, Brian Sullivan, and Amy Fredette from Fisher School, and Dr. Ann Vera Cruz came in to be our consultant to help us out through this year. and we're going to tell you what we built on this year from what we started last year. This is what we're going to be talking about today. And Andy, you want to start with this one?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I know I haven't met a lot of you before, but I certainly know Dr. Goff and Bill. So I'm Ann Vera Cruz. I'm a curriculum specialist by training. And this year I joined the math team to kind of really with the goal of, building on from the work from last year. The curriculum that you'll be seeing today is a model that my husband and I built. My husband is a math education professor. And, it's very exciting work just because this particular model we found, and we looked at actual data for this and MCAS data, we found that if this model was done with fidelity, that teacher efficacy goes up as well as student MCAS scores. So it's very exciting, and I'm really happy to be part of the team. So this is just a quick kind of like in a nutshell, kind of like what is this model all about? So 3 things: alignment, pedagogical support, and additional materials. So for the alignment, this is something we know that the previous curriculum that was being used in the district was inconsistent and outdated. So one of our main goals for this year was to create consistency and cohesion across the 4 elementary schools in Walpole. So for alignment, we really based the work on standards as well as the rigor that's expected for the students. So by rigor, we mean the conceptual understanding, procedural skills, and the application skills that they'll be asked during the MCAS. So while I'm talking about the descriptions, I thought it would also be helpful to have Amy and Brian jump in to talk about the impact of each of these characteristics in their teaching practice. So they're also going to jump in as I'm talking, because this was a team effort. So I think it's really nice to talk about it as a team as well. So that's for alignment. Brian and Amy, you want to talk about how this impacted your teaching practice, or how you heard this impacted teachers' teaching practice?
Sure, I'll speak first, Ann. This is Brian. I just wanted to say that having the alignment and working closely with Amy and Ann and Carolyn, I think really setting the same skills and standards across the district for everybody to be teaching at the same pace, in the same clusters, and assessments being uniform is really helpful for me, especially for in the classroom, in grade level team meetings, for collaborating. Upcoming professional development is also helpful for these things. So I think the alignment has worked really well for us.
Thanks, Brian. Amy, do you have something to add? I can move on to pedagogical support.
No, I agree with what Brian is saying. The consistency throughout the grade levels across the district is key.
Yeah, and that's really one of our goals this year. Another one of our goals is pedagogical support. So when I first started with the district, I think I was supposed to be a coach, but I think being in the district 1 day a week, it was really difficult to find that kind of logistical issue to be solved. So what we did instead is to create the support within the curriculum. So what that means is we use the National Council for Teachers of Mathematics model, which is the concrete, visual, and symbolic. Carolyn will show you exactly what that looks like later. But what we did was we created the standards. Each standard will be in a table, and then it has kind of like these examples that teachers can draw from, just so they can follow the actual pedagogical model that's being supported by the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. The other thing too is that we created specific examples that would be easier to follow. So even though Carolyn and I can't reach all the teachers in all 4 schools, with this curriculum, they can see what we mean or how we interpret particular standards. Brian and Amy?
I'll go first. Amy, you want to go start?
I just basically just the consistency. I think just giving teachers a common dialogue and common activities help with student achievement.
Yeah, Thank you. And then the last one, which is really, because of Brian and Amy, we were able to add literature materials for individual, center, and group activities. So just in case the district wanted to move to a more guided math model, this curriculum will prepare them for that. This work is actually also supported by Alison Mello. I talked to her last year. I want to say last year, just to see, before the district moves on to a guided math model, this seems to be a good prerequisite to prepare teachers to be able to move through that model. We also added a bunch of sentence frames and vocabularies just to support not just our emergent bilinguals, but also to make sure that students, because the MCAS asks students to explain their answers now, that they have the appropriate sentence frames to write down in their MCAS. So they won't be shocked when they get asked to explain the reasons behind it. And Brian, I know, wanted to speak to this point.
And then a lot of this additional materials we've been working on enhanced scope and sequence and certain components of adding individual center group activities. We felt that, adding a literature component is very useful nowadays with us trying to build classroom libraries, that we can connect math in this sense and add real world connections for the students and make math more meaningful. So we added a couple of those into there, which we felt would benefit the curriculum, as well as we found resources that align with the standards, and we just felt it was very user-friendly.
Great. Thank you. So then this brings us to our enhanced scope and sequence. Now, last year, when I came to school committee with the other math coach, we were discussing how we wanted to start by making a scope and sequence so that all 4 schools would be on the same standards at the same time, and we also wanted to talk about cluster assessments. Those were our 2 goals from last year. And so we're going to talk about how we met those last year and this year. And so for each grade, we have an enhanced scope and sequence 4 times a year. And this one happens to be, I want to say this is 3rd grade. And it starts with the sequence of the different standards from that particular cluster. Then we come down to this section, and it talks about prior knowledge, to activate their prior knowledge before you begin, to make sure the children are ready to learn this new material. Gives the teacher the exact concept, vocabulary they'll need to use for these standards. Then we go to that concrete pictorial abstract method that Ann was referring to, using the concrete materials first. That would be our manipulatives, base 10 blocks, fraction towers, counters, anything like that. Then the visual, and they'll have a picture. Here's distributive property in a picture. Could be anchor charts. And then what it looks like when it's totally abstract, which is where you would want to go last. You do not want to start here. You want to start with that concrete and the exploration stage for the children. And then we also put in find some word problems, whole group activities, and there Brian was talking about that literature and how these books fit with those standards, perhaps some individual work, and then some center activities. And that goes on for all the standards in each cluster.
Carolyn, if I can jump in,
Sure.
The other thing too that we did this year, so this is the first year that this is being done, and so the nice thing about what we did here, 1 table per standard, is that next year, based on teacher feedback, it's easy to move standards around. Just in case that each cluster is, too long or too condensed, like if the team does decide to move things around, it wouldn't take so much effort because the standards each have their own chart.
Right, we can just find that. Perfect.
Yeah.
And I just want to go through an example of one particular standard in 5th grade to show what we mean by doing it with, activating prior knowledge, going into vocabulary, concrete, pictorial, and abstract. So this particular standard would be on dividing a whole number by a fraction, but before the children can get to that, they have to go back to, what is division and what's happening in division. And what we're looking for is not what's the quotient here, what would the answer be. What I'm looking for is what's happening in division and how that 12 is the total. But what is this divisor? What is this 3? Because in division, it can be 2 different ways, and they need to know both ways. That 3 could be the number of groups. And so I'm taking my 12 and I'm doing 3 groups. And that'll give me my quotient, which they would all know that quotient, but just figure out what could be happening. And here we could also start again with our total, but this time that divisor means something different, and it means the size of the group. And our standards are called grouping and sharing methods. And they have to understand how it can be two different, and this is the size of the group, this is the number of groups. And that would just be like, so it'd be a totally different visual. It would be a totally different real world approach to it. Our first one could be, we have 12 cookies. I'm going to give I'm going to have 3 school committee members that are going to get some cookies. How many will each get? They each get 4 cookies. Or this one would be a totally different story, 12 cookies. I'm going to give 3 cookies to each school committee member as he or she walks in. How many school committee members would actually get cookies? Now we've got 4 people getting those cookies. So to understand the sharing and the grouping and how it can be done differently comes in really important when we get to our fractions. Because now we're talking about the size of the group. And we want to make sure they have conceptual understanding. We don't want to just say, oh, here's the algorithm, here's the trick, just go ahead and multiply the inverse. We want to have them understand what's really happening. And then some vocabulary. Unit fraction, that is a vocabulary word for 3rd grade that a lot of children haven't seen in a while. And when I did this remotely with some 5th graders recently, and we had to reactivate that. They're like, I know that word, what does it mean? It means any fraction. We have a 1 in the numerator. Our denominator can be any digit that happens to be a positive integer or a positive number. So they understand what a unit fraction is. And then we would start with a concrete model at this point with exploration if we weren't doing it remotely. So some 5th grade classes got this right before our March 13th date of closing the school buildings, and some have been doing it virtually. And so then I moved to a picture model for them. And so you would want to start with, well, here we know there are 2. But what we're looking for here is the size of the group is 1/3. So how many 1/3 are going to be? And there's a 1/3. How many 1/3 are going to be in 2? We want to make sure they understand what's happening in the story. Well, if we do that, then we can also do it in this model so they can actually see all the 1/3 in here so they know where that's coming from. That way when they go to do, and they will in middle school, multiply by the reciprocal, why that works. And they can say, oh, well, I've got 6 1/3, so I can see that 6. And we would do this model a lot, have them draw it out. In virtual lessons, they bring paper and pencil, and they will be drawing this out as I go along with this, and as the teachers go along so they can see it. And then we move from our pictorial method. In 5th grade, they stay with a lot of pictorial, but we want to move into a little bit of abstract. So here comes our new vocabulary word, the unit rate, because we don't want to be drawing 7 again and again and again. So what if we drew 1? What if I could figure out 1 and say, how many 4ths are in 1? So if I know how many 4ths are in 1, oh, I see there are 4 4ths in 1. Well, then how many are there in 7? And this is where we're doing our scaling factor. In 5th grade, they work on scaling factor. They say, well, if I know there are 4 in 1, well, then how many would there be in 7? And this is where they can see for themselves and maybe even understand. I've had kids saying, wait a minute, I see a pattern. And they can then figure out the algorithm. So when they get to that in middle school or a parent helps them out saying, well, multiply the inverse, and they would be able to understand where it comes from. And so that's using the unit rate. And so that's where we get to more abstract. I'm not drawing all 7 out. And we also want to make sure real world application, what's happening. Well, maybe I have 7 pieces of construction paper. I'm working with my kindergarten buddies, and I want to divide them into 1/4 sheets. How many kindergarten children will each get a piece of paper to make perhaps a Mother's Day card or something like that, where they would understand what's happening in the story. And so that's how we go from the concrete to the pictorial to the abstract, activating prior knowledge, and also building in that vocabulary with word problems and things like that. And then we moved to the cluster assessments, which we had last year at school committee, when we went to school committee, said we want this to be a goal to have this done for this year. And so started well. We do have our cluster assessments for the 4 clusters. One is for October, one for January, one for March, one for June. October went well. January went well. We were a week away from the March cluster assessments. Did not get to have the children take that assessment. And the same thing with June. K1 and 2 do them on paper. They do them paper and pencil. Grades 3 through 5 do them on the computer through Edulastic. We do a variety of type of problems so they can get used to that. And so next year, we're planning on having a cluster 0 for the beginning of the year to see what we need to work on and what the children are doing well in, and where we might need to have some groups working on filling in some gaps. And also, then usually summer slide, maybe it'll be a little more this time, and then make it through all 4 clusters next year. Then we collect the data, and we do some data management with that. Andy, do you want to discuss this one?
Sure. So one of my goals for Bill was also like think about what the coach would be doing, tentatively for next year. If you are still going to decide to have a coach for next year. So one of those things is kind of like data management and reporting. So there's really 3 levels of data collecting and data organizing that we do. First level is across all elementary schools, and I'll show you an example later, but this is just, what's the district average for this cluster exam, and how do schools compare with each other. Of course, like if you're Elm, you don't get to see, Fisher scores or things like that, but it's nice to know, how you're doing compared to the district. The second level of data analysis that we do is across teachers within one school. So, Carolyn, can you move forward? That can be easier to explain. Thank you. So like I said, level 1 is kind of like looking at, how your school, this is an actual thing. I just removed the school's name, but this is kind of like your performance compared to the district's performance. And then there's some very, I apologize, like statistical stuff here that I want.
Oh, I'm frozen. Are you frozen?
This is where we see which teachers need support. And so
Are you frozen?
this is how
You're frozen too?
this teacher A performed relative to the school and relative to the district. So it's really nice to see those things, and also like kind of like what the range of the scores are. Like, is it a big range or a small range? I think,
my connection's
very
unstable.
important. And further, we broke those student performances within each classroom per standard. So for example, teacher A, again, like for this particular standard, 3 MD5, the district average was 97, the school average, everyone got it correctly. Teacher A, everyone in her class got it correctly. So we can also see, 1, which teachers need support, and 2, what do they need support in. So that's very important, I think, and very valuable information to principals. Carolyn, can you go back? Sorry. Yeah, thank you. So, and then the last one is really what we've been talking about before, which was the dashboards. So now you also have the student information, per class, which is also very important. Which is to say, for this year, I think the team, did a good job in terms of like funneling the data, not just looking at it from one perspective, but from 3 different perspectives that is valuable for the teacher, for the administrators, and for the district as a whole.
I'm going to move on to, this is what a dashboard would look like for a particular class. In 4 and 5, they would have their MCAS scores from the previous year. They would have their cluster grade from each cluster. We only made it through 2 this year. But where I really think the important part is on the bottom of each dashboard, I'm going to click onto, is broken up by standard. So here are the students broken up by standard, and this you can see, well, wait a minute, perhaps right here on the 5 NVT 7, I have a group that I could now say, these kids need a little more work. I'll pull them aside as a small group. The other children, I can have them move on or do some word problems with that because they're all set. I'm not really concerned about this last standard here, OA3. Perhaps I can just do a quick one-on-one with this student here. This standard looks pretty great. Might do a little bit of one-on-one with this child, find out what went wrong. It could be a quick fix. So this is where I think some important information is for the teachers and how to work on the groups and how to take that data and help the teacher and help the students and see how we can move them along. And then we have our last slide for tonight. A few weeks ago, Bill had the foresight to say, before DESE, we need to find a way to streamline what can be done this year with the remote learning. And so we made some, Shannon Finley and I made some remote learning pages for each grade level. Color-coded, if it's blue, they've already done it. If it has a key, that's where you want to go deeper. We really want the children to have great mastery to move into the next grade come September. So anything with the key is really, we need to go deeper. Anything in gray, DESE and Waffle, we don't need to worry about that. They've done that. We don't need to worry about that. Anything red means we did not get to it by March 13th. It can be introduced now, right here, like gray with the data, the graphing, that's been taken out of every grade. The teachers next year will know that they did not have that particular standard introduced to the children, they have not mastered it, and that grade level can help and assist with that. Then it's broken down by, this is all domains and clusters. Then it's broken down by individual standards, so it's all right there for the teachers. This is pretty important. I see a key, and this is where Amy and Brian were really helpful and important. They, underneath each particular domain, we have all sorts of resources, videos, some books, some ideas, some games for the teachers to use and with their students remotely. And that is what we did with the remote learning. And that is the end of our...
We have one more slide, Carolyn.
Oh, I'm so sorry. You are right. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
There we go.
So yeah, moving forward from building on from what Carolyn was talking about, we really thought about this as a 3-year plan, like at least from my experience, shifting a pedagogical model for math for the entire district in terms of consistency and cohesion as well, really takes about 3 years in my experience. So year 1 is where we were at, like it's really, so the goal is just, it's not going to be perfect, but we wanted to create the base curriculum for all the clusters. So by the end of the school year, we would have completed all 4 clusters. We would have assessments for all 4 clusters as well as cluster 0. We also wanted to clarify the role of the coach. That was my goals for the year, as Bill knows. And then we also wanted to kind of formalize kind of how data was going to be reported, and we shared that with you earlier. One thing that's very important, though, in thinking about the next year is that now that we have the curriculum, the base curriculum for the district's, very own curriculum, what's going to matter is really the shift in the district's pedagogical approach. And that really needs, the curriculum work is going to continue next year. As a curriculum specialist, I don't think that really ever ends. But the focus can start shifting into pedagogy. So we really need to focus on pedagogy if the results, if we want like the most positive gains. So for this model to work, like the next step really needs to be, focusing on intensive coaching, systems of coaching, getting teacher feedback or getting teachers involved. Certainly during our professional development sessions, teachers have been interested in modifying or moving standards around based on their teaching practice, which I think is great. Also improving assessments based on, the scoring. I think the scoring can be more consistent. And then, also we want to gather long-term data, to start calibrating, because eventually we want to know if the cluster assessments do have some reliability with the MCAS scores, so that, we can start thinking about, okay, do the cluster assessments, I don't want to say predict, but if we have enough data, then we can start answering those questions. So as of now, we're in year 1, so we don't have any of that. But I think in the years to come, this is definitely going to be a feasible approach to shifting the model. Brian and Amy, do you have anything else to add?
I would just like to add, I think in this year's role, with me being a coach at Elm Street and not having the ability to go into teachers' classrooms, I see it's very important to have a coach in a building that can be able to do those certain things and be able to sit and collaborate with maybe a newer teacher or teachers that have even been there for a longer, a veteran teacher that maybe just needs a little bit brushing up of certain skills or whatnot. But I think I see the benefit of having a coach. Having done this all year, I know why it's important.
We want to open up to any questions.
And sorry, Carolyn, just one more thing. Another thing that I wanted to add is just that we didn't want the curriculum to just be like, here's like a bunch of resources, right? Like, because then that wouldn't be so different than purchasing a textbook and just saying, here, what we really wanted to happen was, hey, the standards are different. MCAS is different. Like, how do we provide the best teaching possible to our students? And so we really need to think about, reflective practice and kind of thinking about shifting our pedagogical models to support the expectations that will be asked from students. So that's really why, like, we all think that coaching is so important. And if there's nothing else, like, we'd like to end there.
We'll take any questions. Bridget, I just made you host again.
Thank you.
Questions from the committee? Ms. Gallivan.
First of all, I think this is just so exciting, and the work that you've done is excellent. I think that, like, a good while ago, kids sort of were labeled as you're either a math kid or you're not a math kid because of what comes to you innately. And I love to see the fact that you're just teaching kids how to think mathematically. It's really, really important, and I love the foundation that you've set. I think that I was curious about what Brian and Amy would say about the need for a coach who can interact with the teachers. So I'm just curious. I'm thinking that you probably agree, Amy, but I'm not. I think there's a limit if you have your own classroom that you have to be working in at the same time. I'm guessing we should be aiming for a coach for Fisher and Elm next year.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's very difficult to be a full-time classroom teacher and try to coach. I think a coach would be beyond beneficial.
And I know from experience you're an amazing classroom teacher, so you probably are exhausted this year. One of the things that came up was you talked about possibly moving to guided math. I was just curious what that meant.
So guided math is when you work more in small groups. You start with a whole group, you work together, everybody's on the same standard, but then they can rotate. You can have a game group, so they can have practice in some groups. That can be differentiated. This is where you can get your differentiated instruction. When the group comes to you, you can work on what the needs are at that point. So when we were looking at that data dashboard and some children were in red, that could be that group time. I could pull them and work on that standard with them, while the other children, I could work on that standard but deeper when they came, because they had already mastered that. So it's giving the children what they need in different small groups.
So is
The other
that
thing
something?
too, sorry, I'm sorry. Can I further explain? The other
Oh,
thing too
absolutely.
about guided math is that it allows the teacher to kind of think about math in a interdisciplinary or complex way, in a sense that, you know, if students are more interested in literature, then certainly you can have a center that focuses on math and literature. You can have another center if students need more rote stuff, because honestly, like, you know, their math facts, like, they need to know that, like, that's not always fun, but you don't always have time for every child to have that practice. And then sometimes you need that one-on-one time that Carolyn was talking about. So guided math is a pedagogical model that allows you to teach traditionally at a shorter amount of time, but then have these prepared materials, so that, you know, when students come with different interests, different abilities, you can cater to all of them.
Thank you.
Further questions from the committee? Scrolling through it. Seeing none, thank you very much, everyone. We appreciate you coming out this evening.
Thank you, Carolyn, for driving. Nope, I'm frozen. Are you frozen?
No, I think it's okay. You're frozen again?
This is a new business and an update on remote learning. We have Lisa Rizzo, Liz Smith, and Caitlin Avila, who are going to provide us an update with remote learning and answer any questions we have. Dr. Goff, do you want to kick it off?
I'm going to turn my sound on. So you can-
Sure. My screen's freezing every now and then, so if it is, I may have to turn my screen off. I know that school committee and others, you know, may be curious about what's actually going on in terms of what remote learning looks like. So these are just 3 examples at different levels, and I'm going to let the teachers explain so I don't steal their thunder, so to speak. So why don't we start with Lisa at Elm Street School. Thanks, Lisa, for joining us. And if you're in the math, please, you're welcome to stay, but if not, I know that it's been a busy week, so if it, feel free to, you know, log off if you need to. I'm frozen again.
Hi, everybody. I teach third grade at Elm Street School, and I work on a team with 3 other amazing teachers. We have since
How is
really
yours? Is
this all
yours
started,
smooth?
the remote learning started. We've
No, I'll
been
just go in with you if I need to, yeah.
together,
Mm-hmm.
which we're really
I turned my
fortunate
screen
that
off.
we decided it would be the most equitable way to get everything to the students. We collaborate weekly. We kind of, can everybody hear me? On my internet. Can you hear my voice? Okay.
Lisa, try turning your screen off, and then that might help. Can you hear her now?
Can you hear me?
Try it again.
Okay, hold on.
Oh. I can hear her there.
Can you hear my voice better?
Yes, a little bit. Try it now.
I'm having a hard time with my internet bugging me out. Can you hear me?
Lisa, why don't we move to Liz and then we can come back to you?
If you can't hear me, I'll close out, I'll come back.
Okay. Yeah, why don't we do that and we'll go to Liz.
So can people hear me? Okay, so far, awesome. Okay, great. So I'm Elizabeth Smith. I teach both 6th and 7th grade social studies at Johnson, and ironically, a lot of what I imagined I would be talking about is repeating some of what Lisa said, and then kind of previewing for Caitlin. You know, the beauty of being in the middle is that we definitely incorporate some of the elements from the elementary school as well as the high school to kind of make that middle school magic these days. So I know one of the elements that the elementary school is using is logs, and that's definitely something that we're using as a primary communication piece with our families. It's just been a really great example of the flexibility and communication of all the stakeholders. So if you could have seen the log that we sent on March 16th, that first week, compared to the log that we are sending, next week for May 4th, there's been a really dramatic change in that outlook. And it's really because all those stakeholders are communicating. We have got feedback from parents, from special ed, from other staff members and students. So each week, students get a calendar view of what their week will look like with the subjects that they have, as well as the days of the week. And, I just think that in these uncertain times, all students, really any of us want to know is, what does Wednesday look like? And so having that log has really helped students to have an idea of what their day will be. And then the move that we made, similar to the high school, the week before vacation, was into the rotating schedule, and that's been really great for students as well. So now students attend 3 classes a day between 9 and noon. They're about 45 minutes each. And I would say that the primary delivery of instruction is really through live weeks, much like what we're doing now. We utilize the Google Meet format through that whole Google suite that we have with Classroom. And so students and regular ed and special ed staff are coming together at those assigned times, and we're meeting, and we go over material that we had discussed in the last class. Students are able to respond either by speaking, or they can contribute to a chat that's running on the side, and then we're able to provide additional instruction for the new lesson of the day, and then also provide time for students to actually begin that activity. And although we can't actually be together, I just think one of the really neat things has been when students are actually working on material and we're in this video setting and they're able to jump off and work, and they might jump back in. We might go into presentation mode so that I can actually manipulate the screen and show them how to access something or where they might need to be. And so it's as live as we can possibly be right now. And we've really seen nice improvement in class attendance and work completion as a result of that shift. So that's been really great as well. And we also are maintaining our weekly meetings. The team model is really essential in middle school. And so we've been keeping up with those weekly meetings, not only at our grade levels, but also with our PLC, our subject areas. So we're really making sure that we're able to reach out to students in need through the team level, and that we're also able to do our best to really stay on pace with one another when it comes to content, so that we can help all of these students really best set themselves up for success, not only for the end of this year, but to really identify those essentials that will help them come September. And just real kudos to all the kids, because they have been rock stars about adapting to everything that is thrown their way. And I have learned a lot of savvy tech tips in the last few weeks from them, so that's been really neat as well. So I don't know if there are any questions for me or Steve, if you want to chime in there.
They're doing great.
Questions for Liz? All right, just gonna scroll through everybody. Thank you so much, Liz. I really appreciate it.
So we can move on to Caitlin, and we emailed Lisa, sorry, the number in case she wants to, is able to call in.
All right, can everyone hear me? I can turn my video off if I need to, but so my name is Caitlin Abella. I'm a high school English teacher, so I'm happy to report on how my experience remote teaching has been thus far. We have a ways to go, but so far I'll report kind of on what I've been doing in my classroom and things that have been proven useful so far. So I currently teach 3 classes at the freshman CP1 level and 2 at the junior CP1 level. And I recognize that, especially now, assigning work that allows for differentiation and choice is of the utmost importance in order to accommodate diverse learners who are trying to acclimate to such a drastic change as are all of us. So in order to accomplish this goal of differentiation, I'll just kind of talk about an assignment that I did specifically that I think was pretty successful in student engagement and working on their English skills. I created an assignment that allowed student choice while they explored relevant articles and videos and worked to further their English skills. It was a 5x5 assignment that encouraged students to do 5 important things each day: read, watch, write, ask, and understand. So these categories were broken up and had 5 different materials or questions within them that students would then pick one of from each category to explore and answer. So because this assignment is difficult to understand by just reading the directions alone, I dedicated some time during a virtual class session to go through the assignment using the screen share capability on Google Meet. That's where we've been doing a lot of our sessions and optional office hours and going over the assignments and streaming different videos. We're using that resource in a lot of different ways. So upon completion of this assignment, student feedback was positive, and they commented that they enjoyed the assignment because of the choice that they were given. They were able to choose what materials they wanted to engage with rather than being given, an article to read and questions to answer. And I think it kind of alleviated some of their stress during this time, which is great. So they were able to engage with it in kind of a more organic way, I guess, because I know a lot of, it's such a shift from going to having dedicated class time every day where they're working on their assignments in class, and all of a sudden they have like a week to get assignments done, and they have to figure out which ones to prioritize on their own and create that schedule for themselves, which is a skill that a lot of them need to develop. So it was kind of just shifted onto them really quick. So additionally, I was able to take a lot away from this because the students were really thoughtful in their responses to a lot of the questions, and they kind of gave me insight to their experience in quarantine so far. The assignment was also pretty open-ended, and I think that was useful, and I kind of encouraged them to use their creativity as an outlet during this time and submit any creative work that they might have completed. And that was pretty awesome because I had, one girl who shared links with me that were links to original songs that she's composed during this break. So that was pretty cool to hear, and I was really impressed, and it was just awesome. And I'm just happy that she felt comfortable to share that with me. So the students are completing work, the engagement. I think juniors have been a little less engaged because I think they have more responsibilities than my freshmen might at home during this time, but trying my best, and I know all my colleagues are to, heighten and increase that engagement however we can. Additionally, so communication, while students are completing their work, I've also been really happy with the involvement of my ESPs in classes. They are hopping on virtual calls. They are, doing the classwork. So if students have any questions about it, they can reach out to them, and they're constantly communicating with me. So while I always encourage students to communicate and talk to me during the year, I think that's even more important now. If they feel like they're falling behind, I still encourage them to reach out via email. And students have done that, and when they do, and they're like, Miss Bella, I'm confused about this assignment, what am I supposed to be doing? I don't really understand this article that I had to read. And then I'll offer to do individual Google Meets with them after their class sessions that day, just to clear up any confusion they might have, and having the ESPs communicate with them as well. That's kind of made that task easier for me because they're able to help me identify students who might need that extra help, which is awesome, and I appreciate that a lot. And then Liz also talked about PLCs. I'm also forever grateful to my English colleagues who we meet on a weekly basis to to talk about, things that have worked, things that haven't worked. I work alongside Bailey Ty, and we develop units together, so we can kind of look at how units in class, that we've taught, think about the essential skills that we want students to take away, and now adapt that and think about how we can move forward and have the students will identify the most vital standards that we want students to take away and how we can have them reach those. So, overall, the shift to online learning has taken a lot of heightened patience and flexibility and a willingness to adjust accordingly to setbacks that we experience. And I just think that these are trends that will have to continue into the next school year, and recognize we need to meet students where they're at and work for the betterment of all of them. But yeah, that's kind of how things are going on my end. So I don't know if anyone has any questions for me or anything.
Questions from Isabella? Seeing none, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
And,
Thank you.
and I think Ms. Rizzo is back on. I did give you try to email your phone number in case you need to get through. So let's see how
Is it working?
Yes, loud and clear.
Well, I had to switch to my daughter's PC, so. All right, so you can all hear me now?
Perfect.
One of the challenges of remote learning is right here. That was one of them. But we have, so far, my team and I have been doing a great job, I think, of collaborating together during this time. There are 4 of us that work on my team in 3rd grade at Elm Street. We work on a weekly hyperdoc that we post for our students. So we work throughout the week on gathering resources for the kids and trying to put them together based on all the different subject areas, so they have different links to activities and assignments they can do on different platforms, like on BrainPop or on Seesaw, which are some really fun interactive tools for the kids. We have the hyperdoc that we have is broken into must do and may do assignments now. We initially just had them working on may do assignments till they got used to this idea. But we decided, based on the essential skills the kids needed, we needed to have some must-do activities. And we've had some good response from the families. I think they like the idea that the kids are expected to do these assignments. So we have our hyperdoc broken into different subject areas. And within the subject areas, there are assignments for each, for the students for the week. So it's from Tuesday to Tuesday. And they're all posted in our Google Classroom. Every teacher has a Google Classroom account. And that's where we keep most of the assignments that kids work on are posted there. So we can communicate with the kids and interact through Google Classroom, which we really like. So if they do an assignment and we have a problem with it or we want to comment on it, we can shoot it right back to them, and it's nice to be able to communicate that way. And communication has been really daily emails with the students, with the families, and kind of just a morning message just to remind them of some things, and maybe ask them to think about something, maybe something they did over the weekend that the kids can share with us. We do Google Meets, which we use Google because Zoom doesn't work for us, as you can see. So the Google Meets have been great. We do, all of us do at least a few a week with small groups, and we use them to connect with the students, really, just so that we can kind of get a feel of how things are going for them, and they like to share stories with us. And we're also switching into using them for kind of small group lessons or checking in with the skills they've been working on for the week. We also do some one-on-one Google Meets with the kids. I've been doing them before and after my group meets. We collaborate with the MSNs, we collaborate with the reading specialists. The Metco tutor joins my Google Meets, my ESP joins my Google Meets every time I have them. So it's been a real huge collaboration, I feel like, and everyone's really been very supportive of each other during this time. I feel like it's come a really long way since we started 6 weeks ago or however long ago it was, but I feel like we're doing a really great job, and I think that the support systems that we have in place and the math team and the reading specialists and everyone have really helped us through this time. Some of the programs that we have, some of the resources that we have, for example, we've been using Flipgrids. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Flipgrids, but it's a website where we can post a grid for the kids, and they can respond to something through video, which is really nice because we get to actually see the kids' response to some of their work. So recently we did a poetry assignment where we asked the kids to find their favorite poem and read it to us through Flipgrid, or they could write a poem and read it. And it was really nice way for us to see them actually speaking, which we usually get to see in class. And then others could respond to them as well through there, and we could respond too. So it's a nice way to give positive feedback. And they're very engaged when they use Flipgrid. But overall, I feel like we've been, having good participation. I think all of us would love to see more participation. And that's a challenge. And I think we work every week to adapt and adjust what we're doing so we can reach as many kids as possible. But I would say overall, things have been going pretty well, and my team has worked very collaboratively together, and with all the specialists at school, it's been going pretty well.
Excellent. Any questions for Ms. Kelly? Rizzo, rather?
I see Nancy's hand.
Full screen there. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, I see Nancy's hand. Her hand is up, Mr. Buckley.
Got me afterwards. Nancy.
Oh, take yourself off mute, Nancy.
Sorry. I just wanted to say thank you. I think it's really important for us, and we have a very vast listening audience that might want to know what's going on in the classroom. So I think it was really helpful to hear all three of you. I think your thoughtfulness and your kindness came shining through. And, my only question is about the kids that you're concerned are not engaging. Is there anything else that you wish you could do, that you need help with? Or, we have 7 more weeks of this, and you'd just like to try to find ways to engage with the families that have had trouble so far.
Principals, you guys can answer this too if you want to jump in with that, because I know you've been working. Yeah.
I think that's a challenge that we've all been facing, and I know we've been speaking to Carrie a lot about it. I think making sure kids have, number one, that they have the tools that they need at home. Some kids have received Chromebooks from us, which I think has made a huge difference. We're now at the point, I feel like we can maybe start getting materials to kids that need them. Most of the kids, I feel, with the use of Chromebooks have been able to access what we've been providing for them. I feel like it's a challenge more getting them at home to actually do the work. And that's something, we don't know what's going on at all the homes and what people are dealing with right now. So we're trying to be really, empathetic and understand that it's not going to look the same in every household. But I think we're doing the best we can. Mrs. Ruggiero is going to reach out to families that we repeatedly try to either phone call or email or, try to group chat with. I was just on one of my meets today, and Tommy Hart came in, and he's been a great resource too. And I think pooling all of our resources to be able to reach these families is important. I think there are a few that we still do have some worries about.
I think Carrie's hand is up.
Go for
Hi.
it.
Thanks. So we've had so many thoughtful discussions about this, and really, like Lisa just said, trying to take into consideration the stressors that can be going on in the homes of our families right now. I think that who I'm going to start focusing on more is the students that we know have access and can do it independently, especially in 3rd, 4th, and 5th. It's just when we first started with remote learning, I think some of our language was our academic recommendations. And like Lisa had said earlier, changing the language to our approach is going to be more effective, and letting students know the building is closed, school is not. We still have 7 weeks of power standards and essential learning that needs to take place. So we need to persevere through this. And, I've had some conversations with parents that say, well, if they think it's optional, they're really, giving a little pushback at home. So we're working with families in that sense to say, we're still here and we have a long way to go. So what do you need from us as administration and staff to really make that happen? So I think it's great to give teachers the okay to say, you can go ahead and check in with parents now, in this next phase 3 and say, what do you need from me? I see that so-and-so isn't completing the assignments that are must-dos right now. So that's, I think, the next steps.
I see Steven's hand, Steve Morgan-Wet.
I just wanted to also offer, our teachers are working really, really hard to stay connected with the families, but so is our counseling staff. They're in overdrive, connecting with families, connecting with teachers and students in the classes, as well as outside of classes, one-to-one meetings. My counseling staff this afternoon had an hour-long meeting about how to have lunches virtually. So they're looking for different ways to connect with students, both academically and in other regards as well.
Seeing nothing further, thank you very much. We appreciate you joining us for this topic. And, please feel free to stay, but also feel free to not stay as we continue to move through our meeting.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Our next order of new business is a designation of superintendent to serve as voting member of the Bi-County Collaborative, BICO Board of Directors for the 2020-2021 school year. Dr. Goff.
Yes, for this, regulations require school committees to annually appoint their representative to collaborative boards of directors. So both superintendents and school committee members attend the board of directors meetings. Nancy Gallivan is also, represented the district also on the tech board of directors, and I represented, the district for BICO. So we would need a vote from the school committee first. I know it's on the agenda for the Bi-County Collaborative to appoint me as to serve on the board. And then I know the second one is for Nancy Gallivan to reappoint her as the representative to the tech board of directors, just so we have representation on both of these boards.
Excellent.
I'd make a motion to appoint Bridget as our representative to the BICO Board of Directors.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Gallivan, second by Ms. Syrick. We'll call the roll. Mr. Buckley, yes. Mrs. Gallivan?
Yes.
Ms. Syrick?
Yes.
Ms. Denizio?
Yes.
Ms. Lucchini?
Yes.
Ms. Gaotitz?
Yes.
Mr. Breen?
Yes.
Excellent. That's 7-0-0. Moving on, our next order of business, as Bridget alluded to, is the designation of a school committee member to serve as the voting member of the Collaborative. Mrs. Gallivan has served there for many years. She gave us an update a few weeks ago from the tech board. If there is no discussion, do I have a motion to appoint Mrs. Gallivan our tech representative?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Denizio, second by Ms. Muccini. Mr. Buckley, yes. Mrs. Gallivan?
Yes.
Ms. Muccini?
Yes.
Ms. Denizio?
Yes.
Ms. Syrick?
Yes.
Ms. Gaotitz?
Yes.
Mr. Breen?
Yes.
Excellent. It is unanimous. 7-0-0. Continuing on to our agenda of new business, we have the superintendent evaluation. So I'll begin. We had a productive superintendent evaluation subcommittee meeting last week, I believe. Just for the general audience, one of the three charges for school committees is to produce the budget, approve policy, and hire and evaluate the superintendent of schools. So it's one of the three central purposes of the body we sit on. and we're required to do that yearly. So, as we discussed in our superintendent evaluation subcommittee, we wanted to begin that process for this year. Obviously, it's a unique year, and it's also Dr. Goff's first year. So we take that into account as we begin this process. But just as an overview of the process, there's a document that we will send out after the meeting that is developed by DESE for members to go through. Each member will then produce their evaluation. I believe when we were discussing timeline, we were thinking between now and say the Tuesday before the next school committee meeting, and I would then, you would send them to me, I would collect them, create a singular document working with Nancy and Beth, who are also on the subcommittee with me, and that would be the summative evaluation. We would meet as a subcommittee with Bridget to go over it before 2 meetings from now, and then the final document, which is a amalgamation of the things raised by all 7 of us, would be the evaluation. Dr. Goff will be handing out to us her self-evaluation tomorrow, and so that's kind of how the process and timeline goes forward. You know, Mrs. Gallivan has done many more of these than I, and Beth as well was on the subcommittee with me. So if you guys would like to maybe fill in the discussion we had last week, also serving as a subcommittee report all in one, and talk a little bit more about the process. Nancy, do you want to?
Sure. I think Bill did a good job summarizing. This is probably the most important conversation that we have back and forth with Bridget. I think we want to be the kind of committee that is a no surprise committee. So, you know, I know that people feel comfortable speaking with her individually, but this is a chance for us to sort of pick our heads up and look forward to next year and not get caught in the minutia of, you know, what might be happening today, but to give her our best sense of how we feel the first year has been, and you know, give her appreciation for what has happened during this first year, because firsts are always challenging and difficult, but no one signed on to this as year number 1 as superintendent. So, you know, it's an important time. I know that I always find myself feeling overwhelmed by the document, because it just shows you how many responsibilities principals and administrators in school systems have, never mind what teachers have. So we didn't solidify this as a subcommittee, but I did go back in my notes, and what we tried to do was we are going to evaluate Bridget on goals and standards. So the goals are specific to the ones that we agreed were Bridget's goals for the year. The standards are the ones that every superintendent across Massachusetts is expected to be measured on. But what they suggested this year was to highlight certain standards and give more of our attention as a committee to the highlighted ones. And we tried to identify some in the fall that we agreed, along with Bridget, were the priority ones. So when the document comes out tomorrow, I think we're going to ask Mary to somehow indicate the priority ones. I only found my document at like 6 o'clock tonight, so I didn't have time to check with you, Bridget, to see if you had found yours.
I did. So I can share with you what those are, and I'll share the response to the goals, and then how those goals really relate to the standards, so it matches up nicely.
Exactly. And the whole idea is, as a committee, we need to put aside our individual little quirks and come together with a strong message. On the other hand, it's also perfectly appropriate for people to want to schedule an individual meeting to just talk something through with Bridget, because the whole idea is to keep good communication and to not let any problems fester. I think we've done a good job of that, but this is an important task. So, I'm glad we're on target. It'll help us to set up expectations for next year, which is good too. What else, Beth? What do we think forgetting?
No, well said. I mean, it's a little difficult, I think. I know we talked briefly in the meeting about, do we do an evaluation prior to March 13th, or do we encompass the whole period? That was the only other thing I could think to add.
I'm fine with the whole shebang, Beth.
You're doing a great job, Bridget, so don't worry.
Go for it.
Yeah, I kind of feel like, given how big this chapter that nobody planned for is, it's on people's minds. I definitely don't think that we should get caught in minutia in terms of, evaluating something specific, but I think Bridget learned a lot, and we learned a lot about the team that you built this year, which is worth reflecting in the overall evaluation of the year, I think. So, Bill and I were talking a little bit this afternoon, and I think that if we feel that somebody goes too deep into this topic, we can tell them, take that off to an individual meeting, but it's not gonna overwhelm the year's evaluation. But it affected this year for sure.
What did you say, Nancy? It's almost like it's its own sub goal.
Yeah, that wasn't planned for. Right?
Excellent. Any further questions? I know Mary will get the documents out
We'll talk about it.
tomorrow, as well as Bridget's
You can do it at the end.
self-evaluation. And again, we'll have a time certain for those to be back by, and then we'll amalgamate them, meet with Bridget, and present it to the wider committee, and we'll put the evaluation document, the summative document, into the packet for 2 meetings from this evening. And I am switching between screens, so do a date on that. Sorry, I should. So that would be May the 4th. So we were looking at getting them back by May the 12th and having them gone over in an open session in May the 28th of this year. That sound good for everyone? Excellent. Moving on, I gotta find where I am in my digital school community materials. Fee reimbursement discussion is our next order of business. So we're going to have a discussion about reimbursing certain fees, notably bus, parking, athletic, and extended day fees. Dr. Goff, to kick it off, or Mr. Fisher?
Sure. So we talked a lot about the options that are in front of us as far as fees and what would make sense for a reimbursement. We were looking at the fee for Connolly Bus. We're looking at the athletics fee, the extended day fee, and then kindergarten and preschool fees as well. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have at this point on the fee discussion.
Questions for Mr. Fisher? Hey, Ms. Gallivan.
I guess I would just like to put some context around this. First of all, I think we as a committee feel so bad for the kids that this is the way the school year has to end. And, you know, it's related to this because I'm thinking about the athletes that their seasons are done, and they had no, you know, they had no warning that this was how it's going to end. And, you know, there's nothing that we can do to make up for that, but we did start making a list of all the things that are different and how it affects us and families financially. And I think we felt pretty strongly that if students are not receiving a service, like they're not riding on the bus, or they're not getting to play their sport, or they're not getting to go to extended day, that the families who had paid for that deserve attention. So we asked Mr. Frisha to look into what our realistic options are. And the reality is that it took a lot of work. So I guess first of all, we're just grateful for the amount of work that was done, because what happens is we have a contract, for example, with the yellow bus company. The bus fees don't pay the whole cost of it. Some of it is paid for by the town and some of it is paid for by the families. But we also need those yellow buses to be coming in September, hopefully, when we need them. So we have a vested interest in making sure that Conley Bus doesn't go out of business, for example. And so what Mike Frisha had to do was go to the bus company, along with collaborating, or at least talking with people in other towns to say, okay, you use this same service, we need to negotiate a reimbursement first from them. So it took getting a reimbursement from the individual bus companies, and then seeing how much money we had, and thinking about the fact that students haven't ridden the bus since March 13th. So that was the reason that it wasn't just a decision that could have been made a couple of weeks ago. There was a lot of work involved in it. Mike, I think it would be helpful if you sort of explain overall what our thoughts are about how we would reimburse buses, and because it's different from athletics. So, you know, I think just setting the context is the important part, so that people understand what we're proposing. I don't know whether it makes sense, Bill, to go through them one by one, or for him to take them as a group. I don't know if you have a preference.
Mike, I think that might be helpful, just to kind of go down the list.
Okay, so let's start with Connolly Bus. Nancy did a nice job of describing the background here. We were able to negotiate with Connolly Bus because of obviously the time that the buses are not running. It's important to mention that Connolly Bus still has fixed costs in their contract that they have to pay regardless of whether the service is being utilized or not. We met with about 14 towns, as well as Walpole, hashed out an agreement with Connolly Bus we feel was very reasonable. They came to the table, and I think they put the highest offer I've heard on the table for reimbursement, and that reimbursement was 48% of what the original contract was as a reimbursement. So we're paying 52% of the original contract. Having said that, we took the daily rate. If you take the cost of the bus fee and divide it over 180 days that students would ride, for the days that the buses were not utilized, it created a reimbursement or refund for each student of $90.27. So our office has already started to prepare. We're talking about 1,200 reimbursements. So we've already started to look at how we're going to do that and the mechanics of it, in waiting for the school committee to issue their final vote on that refund. We are prepared to do 600 reimbursements by May 7th, and that warrant that goes out. and then the final 600 would be on May 14th. So very happy with the way the negotiations went. Obviously, we're still paying 52% of the contract, but I'm happy that we can reimburse families for the portion that they didn't get to utilize. Happy to answer any other questions.
Further questions for Mr. Fisher? Excellent. Seeing none, you want to keep going?
Okay. The athletics fee we could talk about. So obviously the sports season didn't take place this year. Families paid athletic fees for the spring, didn't get to utilize them. Those were $225 per student unless it was a third sport, and then it was $50. There are several different options we can do with the athletics fee that we talked about. If the school committee's in agreement, we worked on a Google document, a Google form that will populate all the information and choices that parents would like to take. We're offering the option to carry that fee forward for that same student into the fall season. We're offering an opportunity to transfer that fee forward for a sibling to the fall season. Families can take a straight refund if that's what they choose at this point. Or the fourth option would be a donation if they feel they want to support the athletic program and that's what they feel is appropriate at this time. That's a fourth donation. It's on a simple Google form document. You populate the information that is critical so our athletic director knows who's affected and what action to take. And then we'll begin to issue those refunds or move the money forward, whatever action is chosen, starting probably tomorrow when that Google form goes out if the school committee agrees to those options.
Questions for Mr. Fisher on the athletic fee?
Mike, I think it might make sense when you send it out or when Ron Dowd sends it out to ask people to respond by a certain time, just so that you don't get 3 tomorrow and 5 the next day, so that your office can deal with it most efficiently. Or maybe you're just gonna wait until Ron gets answers from everybody. I'm not sure what your thinking is, but give them an idea of the fact that you'd like a deadline.
Okay, I'll add that on to the Google form. Great idea. And I think with that form, we'll know exactly who we're targeting for that reimbursement of those things, and we can follow up with them as well if we don't hear from them. But thank you, Nancy. It's a great idea.
Mike, Brendan has a question.
Okay.
I was just wondering if that money could be transferred to the winter sports season for next year or just the fall.
So it's a great question, and we debated that back and forth. Because of all the fee reimbursements and the logistics of what we're talking about tonight, not just athletics, but it all goes through a small business office who's working from home, working from work, trying to keep things together for the entire district and our larger budget. We agreed that one season would be about as far as we could go because we have an athletic director who's working intermittently, online, remotely, and keeping track of these would be a tall task if we start to carry it forward beyond the fall season.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Excellent. Further questions? Seeing none, keep going, Mike.
Okay, so we have extended day. So ending on March 13th, split the month basically in half for extended day families who are in the program. They have a portion of that month of March that's owed back to them. So our extended day director, Devin Clifford, has kept a close eye on these things. We anticipated that we would be at this point. He has a full list of anyone who would be reimbursed, and we're giving a similar option on a Google form, similar to athletics, where families can, a little bit simpler, families can either move it forward into next year, they could have a reimbursement, or they could, again, make a donation to the program. And the donation by no means is an obligation. It's simply an ask if somebody feels like this is a time where they can help out a program, that's fine. And we just wanted to offer that option for families. And we need to keep track of every choice that every family's making. We could do that through that Google form online. So again, those fees, I can't really give you, I can give you an overall projection. It's about $53,000 that goes back to families, but each family participates differently within the extended day program. It could be 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 day, or 5 day, and each one of those options creates a different reimbursement. So the total is about $53,000 for the program.
Questions on extended day for Mr. Frischer? Seeing none, you want to take it home, Mike, with student parking?
Okay, so student parking, we have the spreadsheet of all the students who paid for parking at the high school this year. This is one of the more simpler ones. It's not really an option here other than really a straight reimbursement. Similar formula to the bus contract. We took the cost of the parking fee per year, divided over 180 days, and we will credit back families for the days that they didn't utilize the parking space at the high school. And that reimbursement will go out pending, obviously, the school committee's agreement with reimbursing on that. I don't have that actual fee in front of me right now, but I could get that to you. I think we've talked about it in one of our past meetings, so I apologize.
Okay. Any questions? Seeing none, I would need a motion and a second to reimburse bus, parking, athletic, and extended day fees in the manner that Mr. Frischer just laid it out.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Gallivan, second by Ms. Gaotitz. Call the roll. Mr. Buckley, yes. Mrs. Gallivan?
Yes.
Ms. Cyrek?
Yes.
Ms. Nizio?
Yes.
Ms. Lucchini?
Yes.
Ms. Gaotitz?
Yes.
Mr. Breen?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mike. And I know you said emails will be going up. We'll also make sure the information is in our e-notes as well. Our next order of business, moving on down the new businesses, a furlough discussion of cafeteria aides, teachers' aides, van drivers, and extended day staff. I don't know, Dr. Goff, would you like to begin?
Yeah, I can begin and then open it up to Mike or school committee. This furlough, as Bill mentioned, it concerns cafeteria aides, teacher aides, van drivers, and extended day. Teacher aides, that means the recess aides and the kindergarten aides. This is not the ESPs or the educational support professionals that were previously mentioned at school committee. So this furlough begin 5/4 and end through June 19th. Just for people to understand, what we mean by a furlough is really a temporary leave of absence. This is not a permanent separation of employment. These employees will return and resume their normal duties. We really regret having to take this action, but it became necessary, once it was decided that we would not be open for the rest of the school year. So with that, I just open it up to Mike or school committee for any discussion or comments.
So just to kind of summarize things, and I know we talked a lot about this option, and it's something that none of us wanted to do, but just to kind of give a background on this, for the extended day and food service groups, they reside within a revolving account. And the way a revolving account works is the account takes in revenue as parents participate in these programs. They collect the revenue, and then that revenue is turned around and it's used to pay the staff in each one of those programs. They don't generally operate with a large margin. In particular, the school lunch program breaks even at best every year. We watch it very closely, and I put a lot of time into making sure that it finishes well. It's a very well-managed program, but margins are very slim. and we would find that across the state. So you can imagine that once the revenue stops coming in because school is no longer in session, and the payroll is going out, a payroll of approximately 28,000 every 2 weeks is going to draw down a balance that's very minimal to begin with. So we quickly found ourselves in a situation where we're drawing down our revenue. These accounts need to, as an obligation, finish flat for the year. They cannot finish with deficits. If a food service or extended day account were to finish in a deficit, the money would have to be taken from the operating budget and used to flatten out that account. So it's not an option to finish in a deficit, nor have we ever in recent memory. So something had to be done. We waited as long as we could. We watched the accounts very closely, and we looked for an indication from the governor about how far we would go this year. And if we were to come back, we thought we could possibly make up some of this loss and that it wouldn't be as dire. But with the cancellation of school for the year, we had to address some way of stopping the losses that are going on in these accounts. And that's why the topic of the furlough came across. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments from Mr. Fisher? I just want to echo your initial sentiment. We had kind of watched those daily governor's press conferences very closely with the hopes that the pandemic would abate and we would be able to, even for a portion of the school year, get back to school. But as you said, with these valued members of our Walpole public school community, unfortunately, their roles, servicing our students, can't carry out in this climate. So I think it's I appreciate the work you've done in monitoring these accounts, and it's just so important to underscore that it's not a separation. It's only a brief period until they can come back and open up with us at the beginning of the next academic year. Ms. Denizio.
Yeah, I'd just like to emphasize that too. I think that it would be easy to look at this decision and think that it was a very easy call, or that it was not as well thought out as it was, but a great deal of thought and energy went into it, and it wasn't taken lightly. And some of the personnel that we're talking about are, I know personally, so integral to my own child's experience at school, and are just wonderful, wonderful assets to our school system, and help make sure that our students have the best experience they can. And so I just want to emphasize how thankful we are to them for that, and how much I personally look forward to seeing them again in September.
Further comments, Mrs. Gallivan?
I think everybody has done a good job summarizing the fact that an awful lot of thought went into this, and I appreciate what you just said, Carrie. I just want to reiterate the fact that we have a financial responsibility in many different ways. We have a financial responsibility to the district, to the taxpayer, and also to the individuals that are involved. And I want to thank Mike for doing a really good job of explaining this to the union representatives, and making sure that the communication that will go to these people expresses all of what we just said. That it's based on the fact that their jobs are not needed at this point, but they're really dependent upon revenue that is not coming in. So we had a challenging financial situation, but I feel like this one strikes the right balance in terms of being financially responsible in the different ways that we have to be responsible.
So, Bill, I think there's a question by Brendan that I would like to answer.
Sure.
So Brendan had asked about unemployment. It's a great question. So without getting into too many details, because I can only go so far with answering the question about unemployment, because I'm not the unemployment agency, obviously. So, but what I can tell you, though, is each employee, the way this works, unemployment works with the municipality, is that the town of Walpole is obligated to pay for unemployment for employees directly. We don't carry unemployment insurance. So the town, meaning the school department as well, is obligated to pay 50% of the cost of the 50% of the salary that goes to the employee comes from the town's resources. So even though we lay off people, we're still obligated to pay that 50% of their salary. In this particular situation, because it's so unusual and unemployment is so large, the federal government has come in and said, of that 50%, it's like a math lesson here, 25% of that will pick up, as the federal government will help municipalities cover that because of the situation is so dire. So the town of Walpole is obligated for 25%. Our town administrator, Jim Johnson, has agreed to cover that 25%. What's important to know is that with a furlough, it's a little different than a layoff, and in that it's not the people aren't being released from our books; they're still employed with the town of Walpole. It's a temporary hold of sorts. I think Superintendent Goff did a nice job explaining that. So they will be coming back, and they've been given an end date of June 19th. That's when their furlough will end. And they will be assured in September that they will have a job at that point to come back to. So they can claim unemployment between that period ending in June 19th, and then they would be off of unemployment like they normally would be because they don't get paid over the summer. That answer your question, Brendan, or any other details you need?
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate it. Just wondering.
Great question.
Yeah.
Anything further from the committee? Questions or comments? Seeing none, if I could have a motion to furlough cafeteria aides, teachers' aides, van drivers, and extended day staff for 7 weeks until on or about June the 22nd, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Gallivan, second by Ms. Muccini. Mr. Buck, yes. Mrs. Gallivan?
Yes.
Ms. Muccini?
Yes.
Ms. Denizio?
Yes.
Ms. Cyrek?
Yes.
Mr. Breen?
Yes.
Ms. Gaotsitz?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Continuing on. Superintendent's report. Dr. Goff and Mr. Hunt.
Yes, so my weekly email or notes went up today, so I'll be reiterating some of this to school committee. As we know, with the building closures, we're really saddened by this news, but we also recognize the seriousness of the pandemic and that, health and safety is our priority. And as Carrie Ruggiero mentioned that, please know that even though the buildings are closed, school is still in session. And with this announcement, our Department of Elementary and Secondary Education released further guidance, I believe it was Saturday night, for school districts regarding remote learning plans for our students. And much of the guidance is really consistent with our plan and reinforces what Walpole Public Schools is currently doing. A component does focus on these prerequisite content standards that were previously mentioned that are critical for success for math, English, science, and history and social studies for the following year. So I really have to commend our curriculum leaders, our content liaisons, our department chairs, our administrators, because they've done much of the work working with, and also with Assistant Superintendent Bill Hahn, concerning the learning standards and making sure they're consistent with our guidelines. And they're really working now to provide even more detailed guidance to all the grade levels in our content area staff. So also in the coming days, families will receive a link to a survey so we can gather some system-wide feedback for families. As always, we know that their feedback is important to us, and the information will be used to guide our conversations and make adjustments as we move forward. And we're thinking of doing a separate one for elementary and then a second one for the middle and high school level. So that will be coming out. Just a reminder that the Walpole Food Pantry is continuing to provide assistance for families. and that they're delivering it. It's being, picked up at the high school. There's another distribution this Saturday, May 2nd, and then again on Saturday, May 16th. And I did put a link in my notice for this week if anybody needs additional support or people that haven't reached out that need to reach out, a phone number and an email where they can reach out to the food service in Maria Hall. Also, as a reminder, for mental health support services, we have our interface. I put a link up there as well. And there's also some support services that William James College through Interface is providing, even like children's virtual lunch bunch, workshops for parents, some virtual sessions. So that link is up there as well. There's some pretty amazing resources and workshops, both for students and our parents. And I also, just want to reiterate that if any child is having any mental health concerns or issues, to please reach out to the counselors. And they have been working with students and their families, and they'll continue to do so. We also realize that there are significant questions that remain unanswered, and I know that school's always a place that provides this consistency, that we have the answers, we have this regiment, and this has really thrown a kink in things, and everybody's learning as we go along. But rest assured, our staff is really working diligently to address the matters of, and I could just run a list, grading, scheduling, school events such as graduation. I'll talk about that, and that's graduation for multiple levels. Summer programming, how students are going to retrieve their belongings. We have a laundry of lists, and we are tackling them day by day, hour by hour. So much of our days, and Mr. Hahn's days and administrators' days, have been spent. We're meeting with leadership and staff to address phase 3, and we're going to continue to collaborate, and building principals will get all of that out as these decisions are made, because they look different at different levels. So those will be coming from the building principals. So we really appreciate everybody's patience. Graduation plans are in the works, and I know Mr. Imbush is here. We'll not have that traditional graduation on May 31st. We are looking at something for one of the early weekends in June. We want to make sure that we're thoughtful and deliberate in this process. This is important. And Mr. Imbush, the student council advisors, along with many senior council members that we're meeting very frequently, we're really looking at a graduation celebration that is quite different than the traditional ceremony, and something that we want to ensure that every senior can take part, their families can participate, and even hopefully the entire town is able to celebrate, because these seniors deserve to be celebrated. And we are speaking to the Board of Health. I think Stephen you had a conversation with the Board of Health yesterday, and we'll be continuing to meet with the Board of Health on Monday, and we're also going to meet with Chief Carmichael. So unfortunately, we know that many events are canceled, through school and even around town. The July 3rd fireworks, and as a society, we're going through a tremendous loss, and we feel that this ceremony and celebration will really be a way for our entire town to take part and show appreciation and pride for this particular group of students. So it will be different, but it will be memorable. So we're hoping that we can pull this off, and additionally, we will welcome a second symbolic celebration later. It could be the fall, and that's fine with us. So just to know that we're working on these things. And, at the same time, what I'm doing and what we're doing as an administration, we're working with this phase, we're looking at summer, and then, believe it or not, we have to focus for students coming back to school. We have to begin planning for that now, and how we help our families recover, both physically, academically, and emotionally. So we've got all these, all of these balls that we are juggling, but we are working on it methodically and deliberately. Stephen, I don't know if you have anything else to add. I didn't want to get into specifics because we want to make sure that we clear things with Chief Carmichael and the Board of Health.
Yeah, that's a good report on it. As far as the graduation is concerned, I know there's a lot of questions around the community as to what we're doing. What we didn't want to do was to come out too early with a decision that maybe we couldn't follow through on. So what we're doing is trying to work with the Board of Health to come up with a graduation that isn't way out in August or September when people are gone. That isn't just a virtual graduation. We want to try and make it so that there's involvement, that the students can get involved in an event, and so it's taking a lot of planning, but we are getting there, and hopefully over the next few days I'll have details of that I can send out.
Thanks, Stephen.
Questions or comments in the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Dr. Goff. Our next order of business is MSBA update. Dr. Goff?
Mark, feel free to jump in too.
Okay.
In terms of MSBA, we're in the middle of the designer selection process. We have a dry run designer selection panel meeting on Tuesday, May 5th, because this is new to MSBA. I don't think they've ever done Zoom sessions for designer selection, so we're going to do a dry run with them on terms of expectations. We're making our way through designer selection and the packets. The actual panel will be on May 18th, and Mark is involved in that. And our next educator visioning session is set for May 15th and the 3rd in June. And we've been working with David Stevens, who's done he did a fantastic job. It was our first Zoom session. I think it was probably the MSBA's first actual educator visioning session, and they actually, a couple of them asked if they could join us because they had never seen one before, and we told them, well, this is their first time for us as well. And I thought, it went very, very well. So I don't know if Mark or Bill, and I know Nancy, you participated, popped in as well, have any comments about either designer selection or the visioning session?
I just want to add the visioning session went very well considering the circumstance, and I was mostly pleased with the amount of feedback we got. It was even though it was virtual, it was meaningful time, and I think we got a lot of information in that 3 hours, and I'm looking forward to the next 2 as well.
Excellent. Anyone else? Kristen?
Yeah, I have a question. With COVID, and we're sort of at the beginning of this building, does that change at all what we're thinking about a building could look like? If people are thinking we need more space or distancing, or we reimagine education, is this a good time because we could be at the forefront of looking at designing buildings differently? Does that come into the conversation at all?
That's a great question. Yes, I think everything needs to come in, because especially when we're thinking about what should the building look like when we come back in the fall, that is really going to make a difference in the discussion of what it would look like under these circumstances. That's a great point.
Mrs. Gallivan?
I would just add, it was really interesting to hear the first phase of the visioning, which was on purpose designed to be with the faculty members. And there was, as Bill Hahn just said, a lot of really thoughtful conversation. One of my questions was, where does the community fit in terms of this phase of visioning? And I don't think it's going to be in the next 2 weeks, but it's soon. Like the idea was, you start with, and this consultant has a ton of experience, and his method is to start with the faculty and have a foundation that can be described when you bring community members in. But just wanted everybody to know that I did ask about when there are going to be opportunities for the community as a whole, for us as a school committee, and there are plenty of them, and they're not too far down the road either.
Yes, that's a good point, because Compass and all of they recommend that you bring the community in once your designer gets on board, because you want your designer at those community visioning sessions. And then the second part of that is that what David Stevens likes to do is bring to the community, this is what the educators envision. And I think, Bill, you were probably at Westwoods, because they're on a project right now where they did that. They did exactly that, correct?
Yeah, I was going to speak up. I participated in a parent forum for visioning, and it was after the education visioning sessions, which was really helpful because they used that as a platform to engage parents and community members. So I think I shared a little bit of that with you, Nancy, but I can happily share more. But this first part is an integral part, a step in working with the community. And we in Westwood, and I the same in Walpole, got several opportunities and several times where we could contribute to the community and parent vision.
Excellent. Anything further? Mark?
I have nothing in particular to add. No, I'm surprised that it's going along as smoothly as it is, giving all this remote stuff. So that's a good note.
Good stuff. Having nothing further, we'll then move on to our subcommittee activity. We obviously had a superintendent evaluation subcommittee, which we kind of discussed at length when we talked about superintendent evaluation. Have there been any others since last we met?
No, we've scheduled a curriculum subcommittee meeting for next week.
Excellent.
Remotely.
Remotely, excellent. Anything further on this topic? Mrs. Gallivan.
We're just staying in touch with our legislators, but there's really nothing new there.
Excellent. Okay. Nothing else on this topic. We move on to warrants. Would someone like to take the warrants?
Yes. I will make a motion to approve the following payroll warrant from April 16th, 2020, number 2042PA for the amount listed in your packet.
Motion by Ms. Zanita, second by Ms. Muccini. Mr. Buckley, yes. Mrs. Gallivan?
Yes.
Ms. Zyrek?
Yes.
Ms. Denizio?
Yes.
Mr. Breen?
Yes.
Ms. Muccini?
Yes.
Lost Jen. Excellent. Keep going, Carrie.
Make a motion to accept the following, approve the following accounts payable warrants from April 9th, number 220041, from April 16th, number 220042, and from April 23rd, number 220043, and from April 30th, number 220044 for the amounts listed in your packet.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Denizio, second by Ms. Zyrek. All those in favor? Mr. Buckley, yes. Mrs. Gallivan?
Yes.
Ms. Zyrek?
Yes.
Ms. Denizio?
Yes.
Ms. Muccini?
Yes.
Mr. Breen?
Yes.
Excellent. Moving on to gifts for approval. Would someone like to take our gift.
Yes, I will make a motion to approve the following gift to Elm Street School from March 30th. The Elm Street Pack Battle of the Books book purchases in the amount of $9,292.25.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Nizio, second by Ms. Cheney. That's a heck of a lot of money. That's great. Mr. Buckley, yes. Mrs. Gallivan?
Yes.
Ms. Inizio?
Yes.
Ms. Puccini?
Yes.
Ms. Syrick?
Yes.
Mr. Breen?
Yes.
Excellent. Very good. Moving along, would someone like to take approval of minutes?
I can do it.
Thanks, Beth.
I'll make a motion to approve the regular school committee meeting minutes for April 9th, 2020.
Second.
Beth, do you want to bundle them?
Can we?
What's that?
You want to bundle them?
If you want, yeah, if I can, great. I'll make a motion to approve the following bundle of school committee meeting minutes. As I said, the regular school committee meeting minutes for April 9th, 2020, the executive session meeting minutes of April 9th, 2020, superintendent evaluation subcommittee meeting minutes of April 15th, 2020, the executive session meeting minutes of April 16th, 2020, and the executive session meeting minutes of April 27th, 2020.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Puccini, seconded by Ms. Syrick. Mr. Buckley, yes. Mrs. Gallivan?
Yes.
Ms. Syrick?
Yes.
Ms. Puccini?
Yes.
Inizio?
Yes.
Mr. Breen?
Yes.
Excellent. It is a vote. There being no further business. Mr. Breen?
I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Excellent. I don't think we can call the roll for that. Everybody wave out. Thanks, Brendan and Liz, for staying with us this whole time. Liz Smith, by the way, a historic class of 2004 grad, one of the best vintages from Walpole High School. Just throwing it out there.
I'm a little bit biased, but I agree. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Yes, you too.